Imagine a neighbor seeing your car, deciding they want it, and when you don't hand over the keys, they try to destroy your life for it. No drama, no disrespect. You simply said no. But to someone fueled by ego and entitlement, that no wasn't a boundary. It was a challenge. That's exactly what Marcell Drake walked into the day he moved into Silvergate Meadows. The day the conflict began felt ordinary enough. Marcell Drake, a black man, had just pulled into his new neighborhood, the late afternoon sun reflecting off the sharp curves of his orange Lamborghini Huracan. It wasn't a parade, yet the sight of a supercar rumbling down a quiet suburban street drew subtle admiration, curt nods, curious glances, and a few impressed smiles. Marcell acknowledged them politely, keeping to himself, never one to flaunt wealth or seek attention. There was only one pair of eyes that didn't hold admiration. Cynthia Harrow, the president of the Silvergate Meadows Residential Association. She stood at the edge of her driveway as Marcell passed, wearing a pastel cardigan and that tight-lipped smile that never reached her eyes. Marcell had seen people like her before, the type who believed a title gave them authority over everyone's lives. Still, he assumed courtesy would keep the peace. The next morning, Cynthia approached him with a friendliness that felt rehearsed. She complimented the car, circled it like a potential buyer at a showroom, and asked intrusive questions masked as neighborly interest. Marcell answered what he felt comfortable with and excused himself. That should have been the end of it. But later that week, Cynthia appeared at his door with a request that made her intentions clear. She explained that her cousin's wedding was approaching, and she wanted to borrow the Lamborghini as the bridal entrance vehicle. She spoke as if it were already promised, listing how a classy car like this would elevate the family's image. Marcell remained composed, respectful. He declined gently, making it clear he didn't lend out his vehicle under any circumstances. There was no attitude in his voice, no disrespect, just a firm boundary. Cynthia's smile collapsed in real time. Offense flared in her eyes, and her tone shifted from syrupy sweet to sharp enough to cut glass. She muttered something about neighbors supporting neighbors, and walked off without another word. Marcell watched her leave, sensing the temperature change, but he assumed the matter would pass. It didn't. Early the next morning, Marcell found a white envelope taped to his door, a violation notice. The reason? Excessive display of wealth, vehicle disrupts neighborhood harmony. It was laughable, almost surreal. Marcell dismissed it as petty and went on with his day. He didn't yet realize that refusing Cynthia wasn't a simple denial. It was, to her, a declaration of war. Have you ever had a neighbor who thought your property belonged to them? What would you do if someone demanded to borrow your car and then tried to destroy your life when you said no? Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from right now? Drop in the comments. We love seeing where our viewers are tuning in from. If you believe your success is yours to protect, smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc, because envy is harmless until it's living next door. From that first violation notice, the shift in Cynthia Harrow's behavior became unmistakable. What had been a single petty jab quickly evolved into a steady stream of targeted harassment, calculated, relentless, and unmistakably personal. Marcell Drake kept the envelope on his kitchen counter, not out of concern, but because the accusation was so absurd it almost amused him. Excessive display of wealth for owning a car parked in his own driveway. He assumed it would end as quickly as it began. He was wrong. 2 days later, a second notice arrived. This time, Cynthia claimed the Lamborghini was parked at an improper angle. Marcell reviewed the footage from his driveway cameras out of curiosity. The vehicle sat perfectly within his property line, straight as an arrow. He ignored the letter. On the fourth day, a third violation. Unauthorized vehicle accessories. The offense? A dust cover he used to protect the paint from pollen overnight. Cynthia demanded an HOA-approved cover in neutral colors only. Marcell raised an eyebrow. He'd never seen such a rule in any community handbook. She wasn't following regulations. She was inventing them. Soon the pattern sharpened. Cynthia wasn't enforcing standards. She was punishing him. Neighbors began whispering. A few approached Marcell apologetically, sharing that Cynthia had been spreading claims that he bought the Lamborghini through shady means and that he was bringing the wrong type of attention to Silvergate Meadows. One neighbor, embarrassed, told him Cynthia had described him as a show-off, trying to lower the community's class. Marcell remained composed. He had dealt with egos before. A person's gossip didn't define his character. But what struck him wasn't the pettiness. It was the obsession. Within a week, 4 more notices arrived. Noise complaints for the engine disrupting tranquility, a fabricated claim that he had oil leaks staining the community roads, and a ridiculous suggestion that the Lamborghini was attracting unwanted crowds. Each letter grew more antagonistic, more desperate, as if Cynthia wanted to provoke a reaction. But Marcell refused to engage emotionally. Instead, he documented everything: dates, letters, neighbor statements, and every interaction. He recognized what Cynthia didn't. Her overreach was becoming evidence. The turning point came late one evening. Marcell returned home to find a private community security officer waiting near his driveway. Cynthia had reported the Lamborghini as a possible illegally modified street racing vehicle. The officer, red-faced with discomfort, apologized as he left, clearly realizing he had been misled. At that moment, Marcell understood the truth. This wasn't about rules, neighborhoods, or policy. Cynthia felt entitled to something that wasn't hers. When denied, she justified cruelty as retaliation. She wasn't enforcing Silvergate Meadows Residential Association standards. She was feeding her ego. And she wasn't close to finished. Cynthia's obsession didn't level out, it intensified. The petty violations, the rumors, the false complaints, none of it satisfied her bruised ego. She wanted Marcell punished for denying her access to the Lamborghini, and she wanted it public. One quiet afternoon, Marcell Drake heard the unmistakable clank of metal chains outside his home. When he stepped onto the porch, his heart dropped. A tow truck was backed into his driveway, the driver already halfway through securing the Lamborghini's front wheels onto the lift. The iconic orange paint reflected helplessly under the straps. Cynthia stood proudly on the sidewalk, arms folded, chin lifted like she had achieved a personal victory. "Yes, that's the one," she declared loudly. "Remove it. It violates multiple HOA codes." Marcell stormed down the steps, voice sharp and unfiltered for the first time since moving in. "Hey, get that off my car now." The tow driver raised his hands slightly, defensive. "Sir, I was called here for a removal. I'm just doing my job." "Your job," Marcell snapped, moving closer, "is about to get you charged for tampering with private property. That car is fully legal and parked on my land. If you move it an inch, I'm calling the police and reporting this as vehicle theft." The tone in Marcell's voice wasn't emotional. It was cold and controlled. The tow driver paused. He glanced at Cynthia for confirmation, but all he saw was her smug, self-satisfied expression, not authority. Marcell stepped even closer. "You might want to think very carefully about who's responsible for authorizing this tow, because it isn't the HOA, and if the police get involved, it's your name on the report." That landed. The tow driver swallowed. He looked from Marcell to the car, then back to Cynthia. "Ma'am, did you say you had legal authorization for this? Because I don't see any documentation." Cynthia scoffed. "I'm the HOA president. That's all the authorization needed." "No," Marcell cut in, "it's not. And unless you have a court order or insurance request, touching that car is illegal." A long beat passed. The tow driver cursed under his breath, realizing he'd been dragged into a personal vendetta masquerading as authority. With a frustrated sigh, he released the straps, lowered the platform, and stepped back. "Not worth the lawsuit," he muttered. "I'm out." He drove away without looking at Cynthia again. Cynthia's face twisted, not with shame, but fury. This isn't over, Marcell." Marcell didn't shout back. He simply pulled out his phone, held up the recording he took of the entire incident, and said calmly, "You're right, it isn't." That evening, Marcell filed a formal harassment, trespassing, and unauthorized towing attempt report with the Silvergate Meadows Residential Association Board and the Brookhaven Municipal Council. But this time, he wasn't submitting complaints. He was submitting evidence. The attempted towing incident marked the final shift in Marcell Drake's approach. Until that moment, he had endured Cynthia's behavior with restraint, relying on documentation rather than escalation. But now, with clear evidence of harassment, trespassing, and unauthorized towing, the situation moved beyond HOA drama. It entered legal territory. Marcell spent that evening assembling everything he had collected. Every violation letter dated and photographed, recorded interactions with Cynthia, statements from neighbors who witnessed harassment, footage of the tow truck incident, the video of Cynthia trespassing with the parking boot. For weeks, Cynthia believed she was tightening a rope around Marcell. In reality, she had knitted a noose for her own position. The next morning, Marcell delivered a sealed packet to the HOA board, bypassing Cynthia entirely. He did not request a meeting. He requested a formal review of the HOA president's conduct. Copies of the packet went to the Community Management Office, the HOA legal oversight body, and without a dramatic announcement, the Brookhaven Municipal Council responsible for residential code enforcement. Cynthia never saw it coming. Within a week, an emergency board session was held without her. Confused and excluded, she showed up anyway, demanding entry, only to be informed she was the subject of the review, not a participant in it. Neighbors had grown tired of her antics. One after another, they stepped forward with their own experiences. Unfair fines, intimidation, invented rules, and personal targeting. Cynthia's facade of protecting community standards crumbled under collective truth. By the end of that meeting, the decision was unanimous. Cynthia Harrow was removed as HOA president effective immediately. The consequences didn't stop there. Tampering with private property, falsifying HOA notices, and misusing authority violated HOA bylaws and city regulations. A formal notice of fines was issued, substantial enough to sting. She was barred from ever holding an HOA position again. News spread fast. The same neighbors she tried to control now avoided her with thinly veiled satisfaction. Some greeted Marcell with nods of respect, not for fighting, but for how professionally he handled the situation. As for Cynthia, she stayed inside for days, blinds drawn, the confident posture gone. She hadn't just lost power. She had lost the identity she built her ego on. But her downfall wasn't finished. 2 days after her removal, police officers arrived at Cynthia's home. The report Marcell filed, combined with the illegal towing attempt, recorded trespassing, and multiple witness statements, triggered criminal charges. Cynthia was led out of her house in handcuffs for harassment, attempted vehicle interference, and abuse of authority. The neighborhood watched from porches and driveways as the same woman who once barked orders and issued threats was placed in the back of a patrol car with no audience left to intimidate. On a quiet evening, Marcell sat on his porch with a calm he had not felt since moving in. The Lamborghini rested in the driveway under the fading sunset. No longer a target, just a car he enjoyed. Cynthia had wanted to borrow it to elevate herself. In the end, that same car exposed who she truly was. And this time she wasn't just humbled, she was gone. If you believe your success is yours and nobody is entitled to benefit from it, smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc, because what you own is earned, not borrowed, and certainly not for the jealous to weaponize.